Hey, this is Merlin. I'm back. I ended the last video with an introduction into kind of the structure of the universe and into laying out kind of a an outline for what I want to accomplish with these videos and what I want to communicate. And those two go hand in hand. I want to communicate the structure of the universe, and I'm going to continue talking about it in this video. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to talk about though. um, hmm. I'm going to pause it so I can think. Okay, I have something good to talk about that is a tool and an approach that I use all the time. And I think it can be really helpful for a lot of people. And so basically, what this tool is something that you can create within yourself. It's kind of a general guidance system, and there's a lot we can talk about this. And so I'm going to just start heading into it. And so basically, something I've created in my life through a lot of different avenues coming together is kind of a um, a a button that is a uh, kind of like general do good button, which is kind of a button that I press all the time, kind of with my feelings and with my mind and with my intention. That is kind of just a button that just generates goodness given the circumstances of this moment. And there's a lot of things that go into this button, and there's a lot of reasons why it's useful, and there's a lot of reasons why um, it's good. Um, so basically, I think a lot of this came out of a drive to just want to be single-minded in how I live my life, and I think that's out of a natural desire for kind of a singularity within myself and of unity within myself, and to find a real unity that can be the center of who I am and can be my core and something that I can trust and depend upon. And so, and this is something that's evolving as I change, as I deepen, as I gain more knowledge. And it's something that um, kind of I add to with a lot of different things. I add to actively and passively, and it's something that I can employ actively and that I employ passively. It's kind of like a program running in the background, that that does stuff without me really having to think a whole lot about it. And there's a lot of aspects of it, a lot of different little programs that are attached to it that kind of are automated at this point. Like we all have this. I think we just don't really articulate it and um, maybe use it so intentionally and have such definition with it. And so basically, this is like a button, an internal button, which is basically uh, taking all of the different strings of your life and then directing them all together. And there's still, you can see the different fingers, still the different streams, but you're taking them out, maybe all around like that, and then you're combining them and creating one direction, one point, and it's going, and the point is creating. And um, and I think the way I do it and what I want out of it, I think is something that can require a great or a decent amount. I would actually say a considerable amount of development of consciousness and of understanding. And yeah, and so this kind of maybe isn't a beginner one, but but I think it's something to always work towards. And it's something that we can start as a beginner and have. Maybe it doesn't have as many features as it can get down the road, but um, it's kind of just like your central guiding principle, um, or your conscience, but turned into an intuitive um, inner kind of body and presence, like a living force, a living awareness, of like natural, spontaneous intelligence, natural, spontaneous right action. And I think right action is the main word that I'm looking for when I want to describe this. Um, I have a sense of right within me that I'm always trying to clarify. And I have this sense that I can clarify it to such an extent that I can clearly see in each moment what is right to do. And we don't have to think about this too much or overthink about this. Um, it's just kind of a visceral, uh, maybe instinctual or intuitive uh, sense. And and I think you could tie this with conscience. And I have this feeling, and I've had this feeling for a long time. I would say even more when I became more spiritual, or I started to become spiritual. I started to awaken. I just had this feeling that I have is more than just this inspiration or this avenue for spiritual experiences. This button is, or this feeling of right action that I'm striving to clarify, perfectly, is something that I can use that applies to every avenue of my experience, from the super to the mundane and ordinary. It applies to the spiritual, and if you want to divide it in the spiritual and the practical. It's not just something that helps me find joy. It's something that helps me um, be successful in every avenue of my life. And it's just this feeling that there's this wisdom or this place within me that I can clarify, and I can trust the more I clarify. And it's this will or this drive or this button that I can develop and I can learn to use, that kind of is this sense of right action in this moment. And and I think um, when you fully develop it, and this is like, yeah, when you fully develop it, um, it no longer has boundaries around it. It no longer is a button among other buttons. It has become the entirety of your being, of your will. There's no competition of different drives. There's just this single um, expansive uh, right or upwards or standing will, which is perfectly good, perfectly established. And and I think what this is, I think you can equate this with being fully awakened. But I think on the way we can see it as a tool and an attitude and a technique that we can use to navigate successfully, or as most successfully as we can in life. And and like I said before, this is something that you can you can apply in practical situations if you have the right awareness. And and I think that's healthy. I think it's healthy to balance what is very deep with what is very superficial, if you want to say that, or to balance all the different dimensions simultaneously in this moment, and to find the seamless unity among all of them, and the seamless intelligence that interpenetrates them all, and which is all of them. And so uh, this button to me is something that I add to all the time. And I think maybe you could describe it as intuitive, as this kind of gut feeling. But also it's something that in my experience is often, I could say, subtle or psychic. Um, and uh, and often this button kind of is very passive or very in the background, and it's more like um, this general direction where I sense my being is going in, and I sense all these exact directions of my being, and I do my best to align my daily actions with this inner star, essentially, or this inner direction which I sense is aligned with the universe. And it's kind of like my gut, um, kind of instinct. I can respond instinctually with my gut to circumstance to kind of stay in line with it, or respond intuitively to situations, to stay in line with it, and to to propel this this inner direction forward. And so, a huge stepping stone for me, and there's several, and I would say there's been a couple, and I'll go to the first one actually. The first big stepping stone for me was when I had a breakthrough with my intuition, and I could sense, kind of for the first time, this deep uh, trajectory of, let's just say, um, uh, for the sake of communicating this most effectively, let's call it the soul, or the deeper structures of my being, the direction of them. I had this breakthrough where I realized the deeper direction of my being, um, and kind of the deeper level of my being that it was on. And don't get too caught up in levels. That's just a way of pointing to kind of where you are, developed personally, or whatever you want to call it. And you can even call that the second breakthrough. Um, so once I had that, I had this really kind of unshakable inner direction of where I was going, and I'm not always the best aligned with it and what I do, but I have this sense that no matter what happens, I'm going down this path, and there's nothing I can do about it, essentially. And so I just do my best to stay in line with it, because it appears that when I'm in line with it, I suffer less. So yeah, and it just feels good. It just feels, the more you can be aligned with that deeper will, the more joy you have. And so it's because it's kind of it's like your heart or the core of who you are in this moment. So that was, I'll call it the second one. The first one was when I started. I think we could trace this back to like the third and maybe the beginning of the fourth episode that I have, beginning of a sense of spirituality, and how that starts awakening, different feelings and more extraordinary feelings. And so when that started happening, I started having, um, kind of subtle psychic, very basic awareness of things, and I could, and it was also just, internally, and not necessarily like how it applied to how I related to, you know perceiving other people and objects and stuff. But it was like more like how I felt within myself and my feelings, and being guided by my feelings in a way that was truly soulful, and it felt like guided by the heavens. but in a very basic initial way, nothing crazy. Um, and so that was the first one, and that's kind of a transition from kind of rational to kind of psychic. And it wasn't like I just jumped there; it was like this slow um, kind of unfurling of a higher kind of direction, a higher drive, a higher way of interacting and perceiving things. And so that was the first big one, because at that point I started sensing that there was a deeper will and a deeper body within myself that I wanted to express, and that I wanted to eventually um, honor as my primary core, and over my kind of rational um, drive. Um, and so, and that psychic is a different way of being directed in life. You're directed by your psychic awareness rather than by your like rational mentality. And so that's a different way of being oriented. And um, and so that was um, that was kind of the beginning of sensing this deeper direction and this deeper purpose, and really seeing it clearly in this kind of um, seeing that there actually was a way to create a mode of being that was kind of flawless in its ability to to act, I guess, a perfect way of being. And that sounds kind of incredible, but I really think that's something that is possible. Um, and um, and so the development of that psychic that level initially was kind of the first step in or you could, it's not even the first step, but it's one of the main steps that I experienced that really kind of made this whole idea of this like kind of uh, perfect button, or this right action button possible. And so basically that 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 psychic awareness, it can lead us to that realization of that deeper soul um, kind of level that we're on, um, that kind of absolute trajectory. That's a key word, absolute trajectory. That's what I've been trying to get to, kind of somewhere. And so, uh, psychic feeling, psychic perception allows you to move in the realm which, when it's flushed out considerably, um, or yeah, considerably leads to perception of absolute trajectory of the soul or of the individual. And once you sense that absolute trajectory, which I called the second breakthrough I had, um, once you sense that, then you also sense that doing good is being in line with that. Um, and um, and and maybe the final form is when you through aligning yourself with your absolute trajectory, and you learn how to take your absolute trajectory um, through the full development of the soul into fully enlightened being, fully liberated being, fully formed being. And yeah, and so I think uh, like the highest good is when um, we consciously do we consciously act in harmony with our absolute trajectory, which I think you could also just equate with the soul, in terms of our higher perfect self, because our soul is manifest. as the sum total of our human being in this moment. And so when we can act in harmony with the whole of our being, we're acting in harmony with our soul and with our absolute trajectory. And I think that's the highest good that we can do. And so I think this button, and I would say call it like the golden button of will, maybe. Um, I think we can experience feelings of like profound unity and oneness when we are acting in harmony with our soul, with our absolute trajectory. And we can feel that golden will kind of permeating through our being into a sense where we don't feel there's competition. We just feel like this single golden goodness, which is like expanding and connecting us to the world. And and that's kind of a good way to imagine what this golden button of will looks like and feels like, and something that you could try and make it do. It's kind of like this. You could call it a golden God button if you want, um, and and the golden God button really is this balance between force and allowance, in balancing what you need to will and force and apply force to, and what you need to allow to flow, and then balancing those two together. And then the more you can do that, the more you create this golden light from within the core of your being that permeates outward and harmonizes you with the world. And so, and I think when we um, when we awaken sufficiently, we start to sense that golden light. Um, and it might be Christ consciousness. I'm not exactly sure, but we sense that, and you could call it wisdom, um, and and we know that that's what we want to manifest in our life, and as the 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 body and the power that drives our will, and we want to fully um, transform our consciousness into that, because that consciousness, that will is wise, that will is true. And so the God button that you're pressing is a God button of alchemy, of transformation, of transforming limited condition perspective, limited condition being, and into enlightened consciousness, enlightened being. And um, and so I think it's important that uh, I think this is important because this is kind of the heart of where we're going. As we awaken spiritually, we're trying to create this golden will, uh, this will of wisdom that's in harmony with the universe and all the forms of the universe. And we want to press this button and learn how to press it so that we can manifest this will in our lives and transform our consciousness. And uh, yeah, and to me, this will is something that is balanced with our our highest feelings and our most basic impulses, and the whole spectrum in between both. And it's something that is the seamless, unified wisdom that pertains to all of them and holds them together all at once. It's like a wisdom of the whole. And if we can find this early on, we can avoid a lot of um, problems. We can learn how to temper our I would say our personality, and our feelings and our impulses. um, uh, in ways that avoid a lot of suffering that can happen if we get unbalanced, especially if we get unbalanced and we have a lot of deeper kind of powers. And so I think if we can sense this early on, we can realize that there's this kind of nice golden arc we can take towards awakening, or there's this like fucking jagged, messed up path, or like, a lot of ways in between. But if we recognize kind of the wisdom uh, uh, that's there, and that the wisdom, what the wisdom's telling about us, where we are, and then we recognize the power of this wisdom, and the power it has of tempering our being, and the power it has of guiding us truly, um, and we can recognize this clearly enough, we can see that this is a better way. This is really a better way, and this is really the only way that will lead us to where we're going to go, and this is really who we are anyway. So once you see it clearly, and I feel like, wow, I'm not going to, resist. I'm not going to, try and gain all these things I can for myself, and because I really want it or whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, I can clearly see that this is the right way, and that this is a true way, a safe and true way. And so I think that's why it's important to to understand this kind of golden will, and it can really ground you in your circumstances, and lead you out of naivety and fantasy and delusion. Um, those that have the ability to really carry us away from what truly makes sense to do in this moment. And and I think you can equate this golden will with like the wisdom of God. I know that might not fly with a lot of people, but I think in essence and in fundamental structure, the two are the same. Um, I think you can imagine God as this highest intelligence and this um, highest awareness that is the best awareness of how to act in this moment. And it's a living, existing force and intelligence. And and it's wise. It's the most wise. And so I think when we find this golden will, when we find God, and we humble ourselves to that, um, we can find a way to exist and coexist that can really save us a lot of trouble, and can really uh, take us out of harm's way in a lot of ways. And I think we can. I think this will, this golden will, which is the will of God, I think is the only will we can depend upon and trust. And I think the more it comes into our lives, the more we listen to it, the more clear that this becomes, that this is the best way and the only way that we can go, in which we can be assured of the security of our being and of our soul, and 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 we can really be humbled by it, um, because our ego and our ideas can be we can have so much belief in them, and um, be have such conviction in them, and in what we want to do, um, and in how we think things should be, and how we rationalize the way we behave. And I think when we see this golden will, and when we see the wisdom of God, we it really kind of can shed light on the reality of our ego, and of our weaknesses, and of our kind of crimes against humanity and against life. and I think that can be really humbling. And I think it can be. I think that is really can be really healthy, um, and it really can equate to salvation because it can take us out of this kind of mania that is drunkenness and egoic perception. Um, and it can really bring us out into the light and where we see things and see the true nature of how we are behaving and the consequences of our actions and how we really feel about how we are acting and how it affects other people and how it affects the universe. And um, I think we can get caught up in so many different things as we awaken and just in general in life. And I think God is a force of temperance, a force of humility, and a force of clarity in the face of all of these um, distracting or um, compelling uh, forces, and it can really put them in perspective in a way that nothing else can. Because I think this golden will that I equate to God is really the heart of things and the transcendent whole heart of things. And it's something that is already perfectly established where nothing else is perfectly established because everything else is a limited construct and God or the golden light is the only infinite construct that's perfectly established in this moment. And so if you're trying to find a guide or a technique that you can trust, what better technique than the perfect technique? And if it's perfect, then there's nothing else that can compare to it because there's only one perfect thing in the universe. Everything else is flawed to some extent, even if it's very slight. And does any number come close to infinity? Um, so that's kind of how we can look at what the ego can attain, and then what we can receive when we humble ourselves in the light of of the golden will and of God. And so I will leave you with that. I think, yeah. And so I think the last thing I'll say is I think this golden butt that I'm talking about is this deeper or deepest sense of right um, and of truth and of goodness. And and I think that uh, it is good to pursue this above, I think, perhaps anything else we can pursue. Yeah. So, peace. Take care. Um, ease in being. Adios.